Hey guys, DJ here at Top Tick Cards and Games. Today I'm going to do a Go Control deck tech for Throwback Thursday. Go Control is one of the more popular old formats to play, definitely more popular than the 2007 format we've been playing here for fun. The reason GOATS is so popular is that it's a very slow, grindy format where there's really just so much time in the game that you can really win games through skill and making better plays and reads and so on, rather than by drawing a better combo. There's very few auto wins, even in opening like the Trinity Pod Graceful Duo. Doesn't put you far enough ahead that it's impossible to lose, though it does make it very, very hard. So this is just one of people's favorite formats of all times, just because it's so fair and perceived as being very skilled. I'm just going to get through the list. It's a pretty standard GOAT deck, not a lot of text in it. First off, 2 Magician of Faith. Magician is one of the most important cards in the format. It's very important to resolve as many Faiths for power spells as possible to pull yourself ahead, while also keeping your opponent from using Faith to get back power spells. So this makes it kind of interesting with no Omen of Crossout. You can play a very equalized game by knocking their Faith early and playing the game without any of them, but then at the same time you lose a lot of power plays. Then they have 2 Exarian Universe. Exarian came out pretty late in the format, so it wasn't always available, and some people question whether when you go back to playing GOATS if you should even use it since it was a part of so little of the format. But I like Exarian. I think it's a cool card. I think it's not too insane. It's pretty good, but Exarian punishes your opponent for having Scapegoat face down, which is obviously one of the pinnacles of the format, or pillars of the format, rather, by gaining trample and attacking over them for 14, and just having a body that's too big for your opponent to easily run over. Even in defense, it walls off Air Knight Parshaft, which I'm playing 2 copies of. I'm playing 2 Air Knights instead of playing Jinzo because of how prevalent GOATS is in the format and card advantage being so key. Plus, I just wanted another light monster. And then we have 2 Tsukiyomis. Tsuki is important for recurring advantage with your copies of Faith and like the Dekoichi I'm going to talk about in a second, and using it even to flip down your opponent's cards to use Nobleman of Crossout on like their threat. On top of that, it also is important to lock your opponent out with Thousand Eyes Restrict. If your opponent can't deal with Restrict while you have Suk in hand, you can flip it down to get rid of the monster that's attached to it, and then flip it back up to take control, or steal one of their other monsters to attach to Thousand Eyes. So Suki's just super important in the format, especially for dealing with your opponent's Thousand Eyes through the same method. Flip it down, it loses its attachment, just run it over, it's got 0 defense. 2's not necessary, but I am playing 2 in here. It's not something that I love, that I couldn't be swayed on, but it's not too bad either. Then I have 1 Deco. Dekoichi wasn't used a ton at the time by like everyone. This isn't like the most standard card. I think going back now, this card should have been in more decks. And at the time, the group of people I played with chose to play this card at SJC Indianapolis, which like was at the very end of the format. But I mean, it was a good card then. I think looking back on the format, I would definitely put this card in most GOAT decks. It's just so good. And just the +1s really add up, especially when like your opponent's trying to cross out, or even like they'll burn their BLS on your set Magician of Faiths if you have power spells in your graveyard. This gives you another outlet to just create card advantage with Tsukiyomi. Then we have Thousand Eyes, or not Thousand Eyes, geez, Tribe Infecting Virus. Tribe is just a catch-all. It deals with your opponent's GOATs, it gets rid of BLS, and it's effectively costless when you have Sinister Serpent. Serpent is another important card in this format. You're often going to use your Sangan to get to it, because it makes your opponent's Delinquent Duo much worse, and it makes your Graceful Charity much better. In a format that's so much about maintaining card advantage, a way to get ahead and invalidate one of their best cards to create advantage is just too good to pass up. Warrior Lady is really key, A, because it's a light, and B, because it removes both Serpent and Sangan, as well as just dealing with something like a BLS at the cost of life points. It really just deals with everything. It's a light monster if it happens to go to your graveyard, and it's got a reasonable body in this format. 1500 attack, 1600 defense isn't bad. 1 copy of Spirit Reaper. Reaper was much worse once Exarian came out. I still think it's too good not to play, even though it normally just gets blanked by Scapegoat. But when it gets through, the card advantage it creates is just so insane. And you know, you can set up plays to make sure it gets through using something like an Azura Priest. Azura Priest is another answer to Scapegoat. It just attacks all your opponent's monsters once per turn. And it's a spirit, so you can play it, get it off the board where it's safe from your opponent's like Smashing Grounds, their Tsukiyomi, any threats they might have. And it can just sit safely in your hand. We have Breaker the Magical Warrior. Not much to say about Breaker, he's just another way to get ahead on board. And then BLS. BLS is one of the strongest cards in the format. I don't think it's the most broken card in the format by any means. but it puts out damage faster than any other card that was legal at the time, and deals with your opponent's face-down monsters, kind of similar to No One of Crossout, while leaving a huge threat on the board. Into spells, we have 3 Scapegoats. It's pretty much what the format's named after, Goat Control, and Metamorphosis. 3 of those 2. Meta is extremely good in this format because of Scapegoat. Thousand Eyes Restrict is just such a strong card. It slows down games. It's a catch-all, like, answer to any monster. And it just creates a lot of pressure. Your Scapegoats are legitimate threats because of meta. Then we have 2 Noblemen of Crossout. I've talked a good bit about Crossout when I talk about the flip effect monsters. Crossout's very important to the format to deal with them. As well as, like I said, it's a very slow format, so your opponent's going to just be setting cards trying to gain resources, and Nobleman doesn't let them just slow roll other cards. Then we have 2 Book of Moons. Book was just a super versatile card at the time. Obviously, it still is. It was able to be used offensively, defensively, just for any purpose whatsoever, dodging removal. You could definitely play 3, though. I think it's better to play some more narrow cards. Then we get into kind of like the power spell section, all these 1-ofs. We have Premature Burial, Heavy Storm, Snatch Steal, Mystical Space Typhoon. Just for the regular 1-of spells. So spell trap removal was very important. You'll see we're even playing Dust Tornado. Snatch and Premature just created swings and put damage on the board. Then Pot, Graceful, and Duo. Totally put those down in not the order I said them. Created the most card advantage in the format. An early Pot of Greed backed up by a Flipped Faith was pretty good to put you in the pilot seat. Even better was to chain delinquent duos when your opponent didn't have Sinister Serpent. You would just win the game from that by denying them resources. One common thing, actually, that a lot of people did was hold their duo until their opponent put Serpent in their graveyard. I don't think that's necessarily correct first turn if you go first, but other than that, like it's probably not wrong. And then Graceful Charity. Graceful was kind of multifaceted in that you could save it for Serpent to create actual card advantage, or if you played Night Assailant, save it for a Night Assailant. You could also just dig when you needed to find an answer to something because it got you 3 cards deeper even if it didn't create any card advantage. And it also could fill your graveyard up for Call of the Haunted, Premature, or BLS. Graceful was, in this format, probably the least offensive of those power spells. Then for our traps, we have 2 just kind of normal traps. We have Sack Armor and a Dust Tornado. Sack Armor deal with things like Exarian and Azura Priest and whatnot, and even Air Knight Parshath. Then 1 Dust Tornado to help deal with our opponent's Premature, Snatch Steal, those kind of things, as well as hitting a Goats that they just set in the end phase. Then you have all the limited power traps. We have Call of the Haunted, Mirror Force, Ring of Destruction, and Torrent. Ring and Call are 2 of the cards that really help put damage on the board in this format, which was kind of hard. Like, killing your opponent is one of the harder parts of this format. Because you play such small monsters, such a low monster count, and your win condition is really grinding your opponent out. Both Ring and Call really help put damage on the board and end the game more quickly. So there's the main deck. It's a pretty standard list, nothing too exciting. It's definitely not perfect though. So like, if you wanted to start playing Goats, I would do some more research, put some more thought into your list. I don't think it's a bad list. This is what I would play if somebody asked me to play Goats right now, but I think after a little bit of testing, I would change some cards here and there. This isn't exactly the extra deck you would use for a Goat deck. There's a million cards you could put in that have some small niche situation where they would be ideal. These are the most important cards and the ones you summon the most often, so this is the extra deck that I've been using with my friends because I'm not going to worry about carrying around a 75-card fusion deck. We have 3,000 Eyes Restrict. This is important, obviously. 1,000 Eyes is, again, one of the pillars of the format. Blocking your opponent out of attacking, just taking their cards every turn with Sook. It's just a must-answer threat because it just will eat their resources every turn on board if it stays in play, and it's also very hard to answer because they can't attack. Then we have 1 Gatling Dragon to metamorph our BLS into. Play that doesn't come off often, but it can be game-breaking. 1 Dragoness the Wicked Knight, the biggest thing you can metamorph Sangan into. 1 Carbonala Warrior, the biggest level 4 we can metamorph into. A Flame Ghost for if we needed to metamorph into a Dark Monster for some reason. 2 Dark Balter the Terrible. Dark Balter is extremely good because if you look through the deck, there's just so many spells and so many of them that really create big advantages, and Balter's able to negate them, as well as negating their monsters. 2 Fiend Skull Dragon. Fiend Skull is a little bit worse, but it does a lot of work, and it's able to be made off Air Knight too. It negates flip effects and I believe trap cards that target it. Yeah, targeting trap cards. So it does have its uses. It's able to play around Ring of Destruction as well as run over Faiths and stuff. And Sakuretsu Armor. Then Chiryu Senshi. My deck can't make Senshi without taking one of my opponent's cards with Snatch Steal because I'm not playing Jinzo or any other level 6. But Senshi's still really sick. It negates trap cards at the cost of 1,000 life and spell cards to target it. Really, really strong card. Same thing with Darkblade the Dragon Knight. This card's really sweet for keeping your opponent off the materials to summon VLS and removing their Sinister Serpent. And then Reaper on the Nightmare. This card comes up kind of infrequently, but when it is good, it's great. Being able to get in with a indestructible hand discard that attacks directly. Your opponent really has to deal with it on a pretty quick clock or just set their hand and risk getting blown up by Heavy Storm, which creates a lot of interesting situations for your opponent to try to play around. But there are other cards you could put in, just various cards of different levels, different types and whatnot that come up occasionally, but none of them are as important as these cards. These are really the important extra deck cards, and mostly Thousand Eyes. If you didn't have, Balter is also absolutely necessary, but any of the other ones you could probably get away with not having if you're playing Goats very casually. There are situations where all the other cards are relevant, and if you were playing in like a Goat tournament or something, if you went to one of those cards would be important. Your sideboard would be pretty just tailored to beating rogue decks. You don't sideboard much, if anything, for mirror matches, honestly. You really want to build your main to play the mirror and Goat format because those are the decks you're going to play against. It's called Goat Control for a reason. You're going to play Goat Control mirrors. Other than that, there's burn decks, so side desk wombats and stuff, but none of the other decks are that good even. So that's Goat Control. It's a really cool deck. I have it on me all the time at the store. I don't always take it to events, but I'd be more than willing to start bringing it if people had an interest in playing it with me. Let me know down in the comments if you guys like playing Goats, and if you'd like to play at an event, stop by and talk to me. I'll be more than happy to start bringing it if you guys let me know down in the comments that that's something you'd be interested in. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys subscribe, like this video. Just keep coming back for more content. There will be more soon. Thanks again.